My 6-year-old granddaughter called me in a panic at midnight. Mommy says the baby is coming. Help, I asked. Where's Daddy? She replied, he kicked Mommy in the tummy and left. When I rushed them to the hospital, but before I begin, please like and subscribe to the channel. And we'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Phone's harsh buzz cut through Harry Kane's sleep like a chainsaw. His calloused fingers fumbled for the device on the nightstand, knocking over an empty coffee mug in the process. The digital clock glowed 12:47 a.m. in angry red numbers. Kane, he growled, his voice thick with interrupted sleep. Papa, Lydia's voice came through the speaker, high and panicked. 6 years old and crying like her world was ending. Papa, you gotta come. Mommy says the baby's coming. Harry's feet hit the cold wooden floor before his brain fully processed the words. Something was wrong. Cassidy wasn't due for another 6 weeks. Where's your daddy, sweetheart? Harry kept his voice steady, but his free hand was already reaching for his jeans. He kicked Mommy's tummy real hard, Lydia sobbed. Then he got his truck and drove away fast. Mommy's bleeding, Papa. There's blood on the kitchen floor. The phone creaked in Harry's grip. 28 years of working oil rigs had taught him to keep his temper locked down when lives were on the line. But right now, that control felt tissue thin. Listen to me, baby girl. You call 911 right now. Tell them your mommy needs an ambulance. Can you do that? I already did. They're coming with the loud sirens. Good girl. Papa's coming too. You stay with Mommy, okay? Don't leave her side. Harry ended the call and pulled on his boots with mechanical precision. His hands didn't shake, they never shook, but something cold and deadly was spreading through his chest. He'd suspected Trent Huxley was trouble from the day Cassidy brought him home 3 years ago. The man had shifty eyes and soft hands, the kind that had never done honest work. But Harry had kept his mouth shut because his daughter was happy. Not anymore. The drive to Cassidy's house took 22 minutes through empty Montana back roads. Harry's truck ate up the miles while his mind cataloged everything he knew about Trent Huxley. The man ran some kind of side business that kept him flush with cash, but never seemed to require actual work. He drank too much, gambled more than he could afford, and had friends in the sheriff's department who looked the other way when complaints came in. Most importantly, Trent was the kind of man who'd hit a pregnant woman and run at Harry's headlights, swept across the ambulance parked in Cassidy's driveway. EMTs were wheeling a stretcher toward the open front door. Harry parked sideways across the lawn and jogged toward the house. Sir, you can't. One of the EMTs started. That's my daughter. Harry cut him off. The man stepped aside. Cassidy lay on the stretcher, conscious but gray-faced. Her nightgown was stained dark around the middle. An oxygen mask covered half her face. When she saw Harry, her eyes filled with tears. Dad, she whispered through the mask. I'm here. Harry grabbed her hand. Her fingers felt like ice. Lydia called me. The EMT, working on her, looked up. Are you the father? I am. We need to get her to Bozeman General immediately. Severe abdominal trauma. Possible placental abruption. The baby's in distress. Harry nodded. He understood trauma. He'd seen enough of it on the rigs when safety protocols failed and men got careless. The difference was those were accidents. This was something else entirely. Lydia, Cassidy whispered. Harry looked around and found his granddaughter huddled on the couch, still in her princess pajamas, clutching a stuffed elephant. Her face was streaked with tears, and her small hands were stained with her mother's blood. Come here, baby girl. Harry scooped her up. She buried her face in his neck and held on tight. Is Mommy gonna die? She whispered. No, Harry said, and meant it. Mommy's tough. She's gonna be fine. The EMTs loaded Cassidy into the ambulance. Harry strapped Lydia into his truck and followed the flashing lights through the dark Montana countryside, his speedometer hovering near 80 the entire way. Bozeman General's emergency entrance was a chaos of fluorescent lights and urgent voices. Harry carried Lydia through the automatic doors just as they wheeled Cassidy towards surgery. A nurse in scrubs intercepted them. Sir, you'll need to wait here. We'll update you as soon as we can. I want to see the doctor, Harry said. Dr. Martinez is prepping for surgery. She'll speak with you after. Now, Harry's voice carried the authority of a man who'd spent decades giving orders that kept people alive. I want to know exactly what that bastard did to my daughter. The nurse glanced around, then nodded. Follow me. Dr. Martinez was a small woman with tired eyes and surgical gloves already on her hands. She looked Harry up and down, taking in his work boots, faded jeans, and the child in his arms. You're the father. I am. How bad is it? Severe blunt force trauma to the abdomen. The placenta is partially detached, which means the baby isn't getting enough oxygen. We need to deliver immediately. She paused. The injuries are consistent with being kicked or punched repeatedly. Harry's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. The baby. We'll know more after surgery. Right now, I need to focus on saving both of them. Dr. Martinez disappeared through the surgical doors. Harry found 2 chairs in the waiting area and settled Lydia on his lap. She'd stopped crying, but hadn't said a word since they arrived. Tell me what happened tonight. Harry said softly that Lydia's voice was barely a whisper. Daddy came home mad. He was yelling about money and throwing things. Mommy told him to stop because it was scaring me and the baby. Then he got even madder and pushed her real hard. She fell down, and he started kicking her tummy. She was screaming for him to stop, but he wouldn't. Harry's hands trembled, and this time he couldn't stop them. What happened next? Mommy curled up in a ball, and he kicked her some more. Then he said bad words and left. Mommy was crying, and there was blood, so I called you like she told me to. You did exactly right, baby girl. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. Harry looked up to see Deputy Brock Timmons approaching, his uniform wrinkled and his badge catching the harsh hospital lights. Harry knew Timmons by reputation. He was lazy, corrupt, and owed favors to half the lowlifes in the county, including Trent Huxley. Mr. Kane, Timmons nodded. Heard there was some kind of domestic incident tonight. Domestic incident? Harry's voice was dangerously quiet. My son-in-law beat my pregnant daughter so badly she's in surgery right now. That's what you call an incident. Now hold on. I haven't heard Trent's side of the story yet. Could have been an argument that got out of hand. These things happen. Harry stood slowly, settling Lydia in the chair. He was 6'2" and had the kind of build that came from hauling steel pipe in Wyoming winters. Timmons took a half step back. These things happen. Harry repeated. You think a man kicking his pregnant wife is just something that happens? Look, Kane, I know you're upset, but where is he? Who? Trent. Where's the piece of garbage who did this? Timmons shrugged. Haven't been able to locate him yet. Probably sleeping it off somewhere. I'll talk to him tomorrow. Get his version of events. His version? Harry moved closer. You want to hear his version of why he kicked a pregnant woman in the stomach? That's how investigations work. We talk to both parties, get statements. The only statement you need is from a 6-year-old girl who watched her father try to kill her mother and baby brother. Harry's voice carried down the empty hallway. But you're not interested in that statement, are you, Timmons? Because Trent's one of your drinking buddies. Timmons's face flushed red. You better watch your mouth, Kane. I don't have to take that kind of talk from you. You're right, Harry said calmly. You don't. Because you can get in your patrol car, drive back to whatever hole you crawled out of, and pretend this conversation never happened. But if I find out you've been helping Trent cover this up, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. Timmons opened his mouth to respond, then seemed to think better of it. He turned and walked away, his boots squeaking on the polished floor. Harry watched him go, memorizing the set of his shoulders and the way he favored his left leg. Information was ammunition, and Harry had a feeling he'd need plenty of both before this was over. A few minutes after Timmons left, voices drifted down the hallway from the nurse's station. Harry moved closer, keeping one eye on Lydia. Never seen injuries like that from a fall, one nurse was saying. Looked like she got kicked by a horse. 3rd time this year, another replied. Remember that Peterson girl? Same pattern of bruising. And the Freeman woman. I heard she fell down the stairs too. All the same guy. Trent Huxley. He's got connections, though. Nothing ever sticks. Harry filed the information away. So this wasn't Trent's first time. That made it worse, but it also made it easier. Pattern of behavior meant there would be other victims, other witnesses, other people with scores to settle. The surgery took 4 hours. Dr. Martinez emerged just after sunrise, still in scrubs, but with exhaustion weighing down her shoulders. "How are they?" Harry asked, standing immediately. "Your daughter is stable. She lost a lot of blood, but she's young and strong. She'll recover fully with time. And the baby, a boy, born premature at 34 weeks, but his vitals are good. He'll need to stay in NICU for a while, but I'm cautiously optimistic." Harry felt something tight in his chest finally loosen. "Can I see her? She's asking for you." Cassidy looked small and pale against the white hospital sheets. Machines beeped softly around her bed, monitoring heartbeat and oxygen levels. Her eyes opened when Harry entered the room, Lydia's hand held firmly in his. "Dad." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Right here, sweetheart." Harry pulled a chair close to the bed. "How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a truck." She managed a weak smile. "The baby, he's fighting. Doctor says he's got a good chance." Cassidy closed her eyes for a moment, tears leaking from the corners. "I'm sorry, Dad. I should have listened to you about Trent. I should have seen what he was." "This isn't your fault," Harry said firmly. "None of it. I let him around Lydia. I let him." Her voice broke. "Mommy." Lydia climbed onto the chair to get closer to the bed. "Don't cry. Papa says you're going to be okay." Cassidy reached out with shaking fingers to touch her daughter's face. "I am, baby. Mommy's going to be just fine." They sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the steady beep of the monitors. Finally, Cassidy looked at Harry with eyes that had aged a decade overnight. "I want him gone," she said quietly. "Not scared. Not sorry. Gone." Harry studied his daughter's face. The young woman who'd married Trent 3 years ago had believed in second chances and the power of love to change people. That woman was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who understood that some lines couldn't be uncrossed. "You won't have to ask me twice," Harry said. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went beyond words. Harry had spent his adult life in places where problems got solved with direct action rather than paperwork and committees. He'd pulled men out of collapse mine shafts, fought fires on oil rigs, and once talked a suicidal roughneck down from a derrick platform. He understood how to handle crises. This was just another kind of crisis that a nurse appeared in the doorway. Visiting hours are almost over. The patient needs rest. Harry stood and leaned down to kiss Cassidy's forehead. "Get some sleep. I'll take care of Lydia, and I'll take care of everything else." "Dad," Cassidy caught his hand. "Be careful. He's not just some angry drunk. He's got friends, connections, people who help him." "I know," Harry said. "So do I." He picked up Lydia and walked out of the hospital room with the measured pace of a man who'd made a decision. In the elevator, Lydia looked up at him with serious brown eyes that reminded him of Cassidy at that age. "Papa? What did Mommy mean when she said she wants Daddy gone?" Harry considered his words carefully. Sometimes people do things so bad that they can't be around the family anymore. Your daddy hurt your mommy and the baby, so he can't live with you anymore. "Good," Lydia said with 6-year-old certainty. "I don't want him to hurt Mommy again." "He won't," Harry promised. "I'm going to make sure of that." The Montana sunrise painted the hospital parking lot in shades of gold and orange as Harry strapped Lydia into his truck. He had phone calls to make, people to see, and plans to set in motion. But first, he needed to get Lydia somewhere safe and figure out exactly how deep Trent Huxley's connections ran. Because Harry Kane didn't make promises he couldn't keep, and he just promised his granddaughter that her father would never hurt her mother again. Harry dropped Lydia off at his neighbor's house 3 hours after leaving the hospital. Martha Kellerman was 72, widowed, and had raised 6 children of her own. She took one look at Harry's face and asked no questions, just wrapped Lydia in a fierce hug and promised to spoil her with pancakes and cartoons until he got back. "Take all the time you need," Martha said quietly, her weathered hands gentle on Lydia's shoulders. "And Harry, whatever you're planning, be smart about it." Harry's first stop was Pike's Auto Repair, a grease-stained garage on the outskirts of town where honest work got done by men who understood the value of keeping their mouths shut. Delmar Pike was under the hood of a rusted Ford when Harry walked in, his wiry frame bent over the engine like a man performing surgery. Delmar straightened, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better decades. He was 53, all sinew and scars, with pale blue eyes that missed nothing. Harry, heard about Cassidy on the scanner. How is she? She'll live. Baby too. Harry leaned against the workbench, but Trent Huxley put them both in the hospital. Delmar's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. That's so. Beat her so bad, she nearly bled out. Deputy Timmons thinks it was just a domestic dispute that got out of hand. Timmons is a bought man, Delmar said flatly. Has been for years. Trent's got him on a leash. Harry had been counting on Delmar having useful information. The mechanic serviced half the vehicles in the county and had a memory like a steel trap when it came to other people's business. Tell me about Trent's operation, Harry said. Delmar glanced toward the garage entrance, then moved to close the bay door. When they were alone, he pulled 2 beers from a mini fridge and handed one to Harry. Runs an illegal betting ring out of his lake cabin. Takes action on everything from college football to horse racing. Charges 20% juice on loans. Breaks legs when people don't pay up. His main muscle is Rafe Gunner, big son of a bitch with no conscience and a short fuse. Who's he paying off besides Timmons? City Councilman Dave Garrett takes a cut to keep the gaming ordinances loose. Judge Patricia Moss gets campaign contributions every election cycle. Sheriff's Department looks the other way as long as the violence stays quiet. Harry nodded. Corruption was like rust once it started. It spread until the whole structure was compromised. But that also made it predictable. Corrupt men were always vulnerable because they had to protect too many secrets. You know all this, but you never did anything about it, Harry observed. Delmar's face hardened. My sister Jenny was driving home from her night shift 2 years ago. Trent was coming back from the casino, drunk off his ass, and rammed her car head-on. She lived, but barely. Spinal cord damage. Uses a wheelchair now. What happened to Trent? Timmons wrote it up as an accident. Said Jenny must have swerved into oncoming traffic. Trent got a slap on the wrist for driving under the influence. Delmar took a long pull from his beer. Been waiting for the right time to settle that score. Consider this the right time, Harry said. You in? Hell yes, I'm in. What do you need? Information, mostly. Vehicle sabotage when the time comes. You know trucks better than anyone in 3 counties. I can make a truck disappear or break down exactly when you need it to. Delmar's smile was thin and cold. What else? I need someone inside Trent's social circle. Someone who knows where he keeps his money, who he trusts, what makes him paranoid. Try June Calloway. Runs the bar at the Copper Mine Inn. She dated Trent a few years back, before he married Cassidy. He still drinks there most nights, shoots his mouth off when he's had too many. Harry made a mental note. Anyone else I should know about? Marshall Irwin. Lives in that trailer park east of town. Army medic in Afghanistan. Came back with PTSD and a drinking problem. Lost his house, wife, everything. You pulled him out of debt during the recession, gave him work when nobody else would. Man's got loyalty, and he hates bullies. Harry remembered Marshall quiet, competent, haunted by things he'd seen overseas. Good man to have in a corner. One more thing, Delmar continued. Word is there's a new sheriff coming to town. Griffin LaSalle, decorated state trooper from Helena. Supposed to clean up the department, root out the corruption. Start officially in 2 weeks. Timmons know about this. If he does, he's not acting like it. Still strutting around like he owns the place. Harry finished his beer and stood. Keep your ears open. If you hear anything about Trent's movements, call me. What about the cops? When they come asking questions about what happened to Trent, what do I tell them? Tell them the truth, Harry said. You haven't seen him. Delmar grinned. I like the way you think. The copper mine sat on the edge of town like a relic from the Wild West, all weathered wood and neon beer signs. The parking lot was mostly empty at 2 in the afternoon, just a few pickup trucks and a motorcycle that had seen better years. Harry pushed through the heavy wooden door into a world of dim lighting and stale cigarette smoke. June Calloway was behind the bar, polishing glasses with mechanical precision. She was probably 45, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and sharp green eyes that evaluated Harry as he approached. Her movements had the efficiency of someone who'd spent years dealing with drunks, creeps, and troublemakers. You're Harry Kane, she said before he could introduce himself. Heard about your daughter. Sorry, news travels fast. Small town. Bad news travels faster. She set down the glass and leaned against the bar. What can I do for you? I understand you know Trent Huxley. June's expression went carefully neutral. A lot of people know Trent. He's what you might call a local personality. I'm told you dated him. Ancient history. Before he got married, before he got worse. She studied Harry's face. You planning some kind of intervention? Because I already tried that once. Nearly got my teeth knocked out for the effort. No intervention, Harry said. I'm planning something else entirely. June was quiet for a long moment, sizing him up. Finally, she poured 2 shots of whiskey and slid one across the bar. What kind of something else? The kind that ends with Trent Huxley not being a problem anymore. That's interesting. June downed her shot without flinching. Because I've been thinking the same thing ever since I heard what he did to Cassidy. You willing to help? Depends. What do you need? Information. Where he hides his money, who he trusts, what scares him. June laughed, but there was no humor in it. Trent doesn't trust anybody, and the only thing that scares him is losing his money. He's got about $50,000 in cash stashed in a safe deposit box at First National. Thinks nobody knows about it, but he bragged about it one night when he was trying to impress me. What else? He's paranoid about his gambling operation. Thinks everyone's trying to rip him off, which they probably are. He's also convinced that his bookie in Billings is skimming from him, but he can't prove it. Harry filed the information away. Paranoia was a useful tool if you knew how to feed it. There's something else, June continued. Trent's got a mean streak a mile wide, but he's also a coward. First sign of real trouble, he runs. That's what happened after he hit Cassidy. Soon as he realized what he'd done, he took off instead of facing the consequences. Where does he go when he runs? Lake cabin mostly, but if things get really bad, he's got a bolt hole. Old hunting lodge about 60 miles north belongs to his cousin. Place is falling down, but it's off the grid. No phone, no electricity, just a place to hide until the heat dies down. Harry made a mental map of the locations. Escape routes were important. You had to know where someone was likely to run before you could trap them. Why are you helping me? Harry asked. June's eyes went hard. Because Trent Huxley is a cancer on this town, and somebody needs to cut him out. I tried leaving him alone, tried minding my own business. But what he did to your daughter, that's a line you don't cross. This won't be legal, Harry warned. If things go wrong, you could end up in serious trouble. Honey, June smiled grimly. I've been in trouble since I was 16. A little more won't kill me. Harry's third stop was the Riverside Trailer Park, a collection of rusted mobile homes and broken dreams on the wrong side of the railroad tracks. Marshall Irwin's trailer was at the back of the lot, distinguished from his neighbors by a small vegetable garden and an American flag that flew from a makeshift pole. Marshall answered the door wearing combat fatigues and a 1,000-yard stare. He was 42, built like a scarecrow, with prematurely gray hair and hands that shook slightly when he thought nobody was looking. But his eyes were clear, and when he recognized Harry, his posture straightened. Mr. Kane, what brings you to my corner of paradise? Need to talk to you about a job. I'm listening. Harry stepped inside the trailer, which was sparse but clean. Military precision in the way everything was arranged, from the folded blankets to the books lined up on a makeshift shelf. A Purple Heart sat in a place of honor on the small dining table. My daughter was beaten by her husband last night. She's in the hospital. Baby was born premature. The man who did it is walking free because he's got friends in the sheriff's department. Marshall's jaw tightened. Trent Huxley. You know him. Know his type. Bullies who think they're untouchable because they've got money and connections. Marshall sat down heavily at the table. What do you want me to do about it? Help me take him down. Not legally, that system's broken. Our way. Our way usually involves violence. Sometimes violence is the answer, Harry said quietly. Some people only understand pain. Marshall was quiet for a long time, staring at his Purple Heart. When he looked up, his eyes held the same cold determination Harry had seen in soldiers who'd made peace with what needed to be done. You pulled me out of the gutter when everyone else had given up, Marshall said. Gave me work when I couldn't hold a job. Helped me get clean when I was drowning in a bottle. I owe you. This isn't about debt. No, but it's about right and wrong. And what Trent did to your daughter. That's wrong in ways that legal remedies can't fix. Marshall stood up. What do you need from me? Your medical training. If things go sideways, I want someone who can patch people up. Also need someone who can gather intelligence. Maybe pose as someone else to get close to Trent's operation. I can do that. Spent 18 months undercover in Kandahar, pretending to be a drunk to gather intel on Taliban supply routes. Fooled everyone, including my own command. Good. We'll be in touch. Harry was halfway to the door when Marshall called after him. Mr. Kane? When this is over, what happens to Trent? Harry turned back. Nothing good. Marshall nodded slowly. Roger that. Harry spent the evening at the hospital with Cassidy and Lydia, then drove out to Trent's lake cabin under cover of darkness. The place sat on 20 acres of private land, accessible only by a winding dirt road that snaked through thick Montana pine forest. Perfect for privacy, perfect for hiding criminal activity, and perfect for an ambush if things came to that. Harry parked his truck a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, moving through the trees with the careful silence of a man who'd spent time in places where noise could get you killed. The cabin was larger than he'd expected, 2 stories with a wraparound deck and several outbuildings scattered around the property. Lights spilled from the main house, and Harry could hear voices carrying across the still night air. He crept closer, using the tree line for cover, until he could see into the main room through the windows. Trent Huxley sat at the head of a poker table, dealing cards to 4 other men. He was 31, soft around the middle from too much beer and easy living, with dark hair that was already thinning and eyes that never quite met anyone else's gaze directly. He wore an expensive watch and designer clothes that looked out of place in rural Montana. All right, gentlemen, Trent was saying, let's discuss this week's business before we play. Harry recognized 2 of the other men at the table. Rafe Gunner sat to Trent's right, 6'4", probably 250, with the thick neck and dead eyes of a professional enforcer. Dave Garrett, the city councilman Del Mar had mentioned, looked nervous and out of place among the criminals. The 4th man was a stranger, but his expensive suit and careful posture suggested he was from out of town. Probably Trent's connection to the larger gambling network. Peterson account is 3 weeks overdue, Rafe reported in a voice like gravel. Owes 18 grand with interest. Want me to break something? Not yet, Trent said, shuffling cards with practiced ease. His wife just had surgery. Give him another week, then start with fingers. Harry's hands clenched into fists. These men discussed breaking bones with the casual tone most people use to talk about the weather. What about the Freeman situation? Garrett asked nervously. Handled, Trent smiled coldly. Amazing how cooperative people become when they realize their family's safety depends on their silence. You can't keep beating people into submission forever, the stranger said. Eventually, someone's going to fight back or go to the authorities. Trent's laugh was harsh. The authorities work for me, friend. Deputy Timmons, Judge Moss, half the city council. This town runs on my money, and everyone knows it. What about the new sheriff? LaSalle, what about him? He's one man. By the time he figures out how things work around here, he'll either be on the payroll or looking for a new job. Harry memorized every word, every name, every detail. Intelligence gathering was half the battle. You couldn't fight an enemy you didn't understand. Speaking of business, Rafe continued, your wife's situation is causing problems. People are asking questions, talking about pressing charges. Trent's expression darkened. My wife isn't your concern. It is when it brings heat on the operation. Maybe you should have thought about that before you kicked her in the stomach. She had it coming, Trent snapped. Mouthy bitch was telling me how to run my business, threatening to leave and take Lydia with her. I don't respond well to threats. Harry's vision went red around the edges. It took every ounce of his self-control not to charge through the door and beat Trent to death with his bare hands. But that would be stupid, emotional, the kind of mistake that got people killed or imprisoned. Harry had waited this long for justice. He could wait a little longer to do it right. Besides, Trent continued, dealing cards with steady hands. Cassidy won't press charges. She knows what happens to people who cross me. And even if she did, Timmons will make sure it disappears into paperwork hell. What about her father? Garrett asked. Harry Kane's got a reputation. Word is he's not the kind of man who forgives and forgets. Harry Kane is a broken-down oil worker with a drinking problem. Trent said dismissively. He makes noise. I'll have Rafe pay him a visit. Problem solved. Rafe cracked his knuckles. Love to have a conversation with the old man. Here he thinks he's tough. Focus on the current problems, the stranger interrupted. I've got money coming in from 3 states, and I need to know this operation is stable. Can you guarantee that? Absolutely, Trent said. This town belongs to me. Has for years. One pregnant woman and her daddy aren't going to change that. Harry had heard enough. He melted back into the forest and made his way to his truck, mind already working on the next phase of his plan. Trent was arrogant, overconfident, and convinced of his own invincibility. Those were weaknesses Harry could exploit, but first, he needed to plant some seeds of doubt. The next morning, Harry met Delmar at the garage just after sunrise. The mechanic was already 3 cups of coffee deep and working on a transmission that looked like it had been through a war. Find anything useful at the cabin? Delmar asked without looking up from his work. Plenty. Trent's running scared, but he's trying not to show it. Rafe Gunner is his main muscle. Dave Garrett is taking money to look the other way, and they're expecting the new sheriff to either join the program or get run out of town. What's the move? First, we isolate him, make him paranoid, turn his own people against him. Harry pulled out a scrap of paper with notes he'd made during the night. You still got that tow truck, old Bertha? She runs like a dream. What? I want you to disable Trent's truck, but make it look like mechanical failure. Nothing obvious, nothing that screams sabotage. Can you do that? Delmar wiped his hands on a rag, grinning. Harry, I can make a truck break down in ways that would take a team of engineers to figure out. When and where? He drives to the casino in Billings every Tuesday night. Takes Highway 89 through Miller Canyon. That's 20 miles of empty road with no cell service. Consider it done. What else? I need you to spread a rumor. Trent's bookie in Billings is skimming money from his operation. Make it sound like you heard it from someone reliable, someone with connections to the gambling world. That's easy enough. Half the guys who come through here have gambling debts. I'll drop the rumor with Bobby Martinez. He owes money to 3 different bookies and has a mouth like a broken faucet. Harry's next stop was the Copper Mine Inn, where June was preparing for the lunch rush. The bar was empty except for one old-timer nursing a beer and reading a newspaper that was probably 3 days old. Morning, June. Harry, you look like a man with a plan. Getting there. I need a favor. Name it. Tonight, when Trent comes in for his regular drinks, I want you to mention that you heard his Billings bookie has been bragging about how easy it is to skim money from small-town operators. June raised an eyebrow. You want to make him paranoid about his business partners. Paranoid people make mistakes. Mistakes create opportunities. I can do that. Trent's always been suspicious about money anyway. Won't take much to push him over the edge. She leaned against the bar. What else? I need to know his routine. When he comes and goes, who he meets with, where he feels safe. He's here most nights from 8 to 11. Drinks whiskey, plays pool, tries to hit on anything female that walks through the door. Thursdays he meets with his loan shark clients in the back room. Sundays, he usually brings Rafe and they talk business. Guard, just Rafe, and only sometimes. Trent thinks he's untouchable in public. Figures nobody would be stupid enough to confront him in a crowded bar. Harry smiled grimly. Good. Keep me posted on any changes to his routine. Will do. And Harry, when you're ready to make your move, give me a heads up. I'd hate to miss the show. The final stop was Marshall's trailer, where Harry found the ex-soldier doing push-ups in his small living room. Marshall finished his set and stood, barely breathing hard despite having just done 50 perfect repetitions. Morning, Mr. Kane. What's the word? Time to put your undercover skills to work. I need you to get close to Trent's operation, find out who his contacts are and how the money flows. Any particular angle, play the broken veteran. You've got gambling debts, need quick cash. Heard Trent might have work for someone with military experience. Make yourself useful, but not threatening. Marshall nodded. Classic infiltration. Get close, gather intelligence, stay invisible until the moment of action. Exactly. But be careful. Rafe Gunner is ex-military too, and he's got killer instincts. If he suspects you're not what you seem, things could get violent fast. I can handle myself. I know you can. That's why I'm asking. Harry spent the rest of the day visiting Cassidy and Lydia at the hospital, playing grandfather while his mind worked through the tactical aspects of destroying Trent Huxley. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about removing a cancer from the community and protecting his family from future threats. That evening, he positioned himself across the street from the copper mine inn with a pair of binoculars and a thermos of coffee. At 8:15, Trent's black pickup truck pulled into the parking lot. Harry watched through the window as Trent took his usual spot at the bar and ordered his usual whiskey. June played her part perfectly. She served Trent his drink, made small talk about the weather, then casually mentioned that her cousin who worked at the Billings casino had been bragging about how some bookies were getting rich by skimming from their rural clients. Even from across the street, Harry could see Trent's reaction. The man's entire body went rigid, and he started asking June rapid-fire questions. She played dumb, acted like she didn't understand why he was so interested, which only made him more agitated. By the time Trent left an hour later, he was drunk, angry, and convinced that someone was stealing from him. Harry followed at a distance as Trent drove erratically back to his cabin, cell phone pressed to his ear, probably calling his Billings contact to demand an accounting. The first seed was planted. Now it was time to water it and watch it grow. 3 days later, Delmar's mechanical sabotage paid dividends. Trent's truck died exactly where Harry had predicted, halfway through Miller Canyon, 20 miles from a nearest town and completely out of cell phone range. It took 4 hours for another driver to come along and offer help, and by the time Trent made it back to town, he was sunburned, furious, and convinced the world was conspiring against him. Harry heard about it from June, who reported that Trent had spent the evening drinking heavily and ranting about his mechanical problems to anyone who would listen. "He's starting to crack," June said. "Keeps looking over his shoulder, jumping at shadows." Yesterday, he accused Dave Garrett of recording their conversations. Poor Dave was so rattled he spilled beer all over himself. Good. Paranoid people make mistakes. What's the next move? Time to turn up the heat. Harry's next call was to an old contact from his oil rig days, Jimmy Castellanos, who now ran a small gambling operation out of Kalispell. Jimmy owed Harry a favor from 10 years ago when Harry had covered his medical bills after a rig accident left him with a broken back and no insurance. "Jimmy, it's Harry Kane." "Harry, Jesus, it's been years. How you been, hermano?" "Been better. I need a favor." "Name it." "You saved my ass when nobody else would help. There's a man named Trent Huxley running an illegal betting ring in Bozeman. He's convinced his Billings bookie is skimming from him. I want you to call some of your competitors. Tell them there's easy money to be made if they can drive Trent out of business. You want to start a turf war. I want to make Trent's life complicated. Can you do it? Consider it done. I know 3 outfits that would love to move into new territory. They hear about some small-town operator who's got heat with his suppliers. They'll circle like vultures." "Thanks, Jimmy. I owe you." "Nah, man. We're even now." Within 48 hours, the results were visible. Strange cars started cruising past Trent's cabin. Phone calls came at all hours. 2 of his regular clients got approached by representatives from competing gambling operations offering better odds and lower interest rates. Marshall, now successfully embedded as muscle for hire in Trent's organization, reported that the man was barely sleeping and had started carrying a gun everywhere. "He's convinced someone's trying to move in on his territory," Marshall said during a brief meeting at the hospital. "Rafe's got him spooked about potential threats, and he's seeing enemies everywhere." "How close are you to his inner circle?" "Close enough. He's got me doing collections with Rafe. Thinks I'm just another broken vet who needs the money. But I'm learning plenty about how the operation works." "Good. What about his finances?" "Hurting. The competition is cutting into his profits, and he's spending money on extra security that he can't afford. Plus, he's been making trips to Billings every few days to argue with his bookie face-to-face." Harry smiled. Financial pressure combined with paranoia was a dangerous combination. Desperate people did stupid things. "There's something else," Marshall continued. "Overheard him talking to Rafe about your daughter. He's planning something." Harry's expression went cold. "What kind of something?" "Didn't get details, but it sounded like he wants to use Cassidy and the kids as leverage. Thinks if he can threaten them, you'll back off and let him rebuild his operation in peace. That would be a mistake on his part. Major mistake. But it means we need to move faster." If he gets desperate enough to go after civilians, he won't get the chance. Harry was already calculating timelines, figuring out how to accelerate his plans without making critical errors. How long until the new sheriff arrives? 5 days. Word is he's bringing a state investigation team with him, going to audit the entire department, review all the corruption complained from the past 2 years. Perfect. Time to give them something to investigate. Harry spent that evening making phone calls to contacts across 3 states. Oil rig work created a network of hard men who owed each other favors, and Harry had been collecting IOUs for 30 years. By midnight, he had commitments from a reporter in Helena who specialized in exposing small-town corruption, a state gaming commission investigator who'd been looking for an excuse to audit rural gambling operations, and a federal agent who tracked money laundering in the mountain states. The net was closing, but Harry needed one more element to make it perfect. That Marshall's next report came 2 days later, and it changed everything. "Trent's lost it," the ex-soldier said, his face grim. "He's convinced you're orchestrating everything that's been happening. The mechanical problems, the competition, the financial pressure. He thinks you're some kind of criminal mastermind pulling strings behind the scenes." "What's his plan?" "He wants to kidnap Lydia." Harry's blood turned to ice. "Explain." "Figures if he grabs your granddaughter, he can force you to back off and call off whatever operation he thinks you're running. Rafe thinks it's a bad idea, but Trent's not listening to reason anymore." "When?" "Tomorrow morning. Lydia is supposed to start back at school, right? Trent knows the route she takes, knows she walks the last 2 blocks by herself. He's planning to grab her then, take her to his cousin's hunting lodge up north." Harry's hands were steady, but his voice carried a deadly calm that made Marshall take a step back. "Over my dead body. There's more. If the kidnapping goes wrong, if you or the cops get too close, he's prepared to—" Marshall swallowed hard. "He's prepared to eliminate the evidence. He'd kill a 6-year-old girl. He's that desperate, that paranoid. In his mind, you've destroyed his life, so he's going to destroy yours." Harry was quiet for a long moment, running through options and contingencies. Then he smiled, and it was the coldest expression Marshall had ever seen. "Actually, this works out perfectly." "How do you figure?" "Because Trent just gave me everything I need to finish this. Call your contact at the state police. Tell him you've got intelligence about a planned kidnapping. Give him all the details, time, location, method. You want to tip off the cops. I want to tip off the right cops. Not Timmons and his corrupt friends, but the state investigation team that's coming to town with a new sheriff." Marshall's eyes widened as he understood. "You moved the timeline up. Called in every favor I had. Sheriff LaSalle is arriving tomorrow morning, 2 days early, with a full state investigation team. They'll be in town for exactly 1 hour before Trent tries to kidnap Lydia. That's cutting it close. Close is what makes it perfect. Trent will walk right into a sting operation, and instead of just gambling charges, he'll be facing federal kidnapping counts." "What about Lydia?" "You can't use a 6-year-old as bait." "I'm not." Harry's smile turned genuine for the first time in days. "Lydia's been staying with my old Navy buddy Griffin LaSalle and his wife for the past 3 days. The girl walking to school tomorrow morning will be Officer Sarah Martinez from the state police, dressed to look like a child from a distance." Marshall stared at him. "Griffin LaSalle, the new sheriff. We served together on a destroyer in the Persian Gulf. When I called and told him what was happening, he moved heaven and earth to get here early with a full tactical team." "Jesus, Harry, you've been planning this whole thing from the beginning." "Not the beginning, but once I realized how deep the corruption went, I knew we'd need outside help to make it stick." Harry stood up. "Tomorrow morning, Trent Huxley is going to discover what happens when you threaten a cane." The next morning dawned clear and cold, with the kind of crisp Montana air that made everything seem sharper and more defined. Harry positioned himself in an unmarked van 3 blocks from the elementary school, wearing a state police radio headset and watching through high-powered binoculars. Sheriff Griffin LaSalle sat next to him, 58 years old, built like a linebacker, with iron gray hair and the kind of steady presence that came from 30 years of law enforcement. They'd lost touch after their Navy service, but 20 minutes of conversation had been enough to re-establish the trust they'd built serving together. Target vehicle approaching from the east, came the voice of Detective Maria Santos over the radio. Black pickup truck, license plate matches. 2 occupants, driver and passenger. Copy that. All units maintain position until we have confirmation of intent, LaSalle replied. Through his binoculars, Harry watched Trent's truck slow down as it approached the school zone. Trent was driving, with Rafe Gunner in the passenger seat. Both men were focused on the sidewalk where Officer Martinez, dressed in a pink backpack and child-sized clothing, was walking slowly toward the designated intercept point. This is psychological warfare, LaSalle observed quietly. You didn't just want to arrest him. You wanted to destroy him completely. He beat my pregnant daughter and threatened my granddaughter, Harry replied. Legal justice was never going to be enough. Target vehicle has stopped, Santos reported. Passenger is exiting the vehicle. Harry watched Rafe Gunner approach the fake Lydia from behind, moving with the predatory grace of a man who'd done this before. The sight of a grown man stalking what he believed to be a 6-year-old girl made Harry's stomach turn. All units, suspect is approaching the decoy. Prepare to move on my signal. Rafe reached out to grab Officer Martinez's shoulder. The moment his hand made contact, everything happened at once. Go, go, go. State police officers emerged from concealment points around the school zone like sharks rising from deep water. Martinez spun around, shedding her child disguise to reveal tactical gear and a service weapon. Trent gunned his truck's engine, trying to flee, but found his escape route blocked by 2 unmarked police vehicles. Within 30 seconds, both Trent and Rafe were on the ground in handcuffs, surrounded by enough firepower to stop a small army. The arrest made headlines across Montana. By evening, news crews from 3 major networks were parked outside the Bozeman courthouse, and reporters were digging into every aspect of Trent Huxley's criminal enterprise. Sheriff LaSalle held a press conference that laid out the full scope of the corruption investigation. Deputy Timmons was suspended pending a federal audit. City Councilman Garrett was under investigation for taking bribes. Judge Moss had mysteriously decided to take early retirement. But for Harry, the real satisfaction came 3 days later when he stood in the parking lot of the county courthouse and watched Trent being transferred to federal custody. Trent looked like a broken man. His expensive clothes had been replaced by an orange jumpsuit. His confident swagger was gone, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who'd realized too late that actions had consequences. Kane, Trent called out as he was loaded into the transport van. This isn't over. I've got lawyers, connections. I'll be out in 6 months, and when I am. No, Harry said quietly, his voice carrying across the parking lot with absolute certainty. You won't. Trent's face twisted with rage and desperation. You think you've won? You destroyed my life, but I'll find a way to destroy yours. Your daughter, your granddaughter. Harry stepped closer to the van, and his expression made the federal marshals tense up. You just threatened my family in front of 8 law enforcement officers and 3 news cameras. That's going to look real good to the federal prosecutor. You were just making threats against federal witnesses in a kidnapping case. That's another 5 years minimum. Harry's smile was razor thin. Keep talking, Trent. Every word you say digs that hole a little deeper. Trent seemed to realize he'd made another mistake. His mouth snapped shut, and he slumped back in his seat as the van doors closed. Attempted kidnapping of a minor, conspiracy to commit extortion, illegal gambling operation, money laundering, assault with intent to cause grievous bodily harm to a pregnant woman. LaSalle read from a federal indictment that was 3 pages long. Conservative estimate is 25 to 30 years, assuming he pleads guilty and cooperates fully. He won't cooperate, Harry said. Too arrogant, too convinced he can beat the system. Then he's looking at life without parole. Harry nodded. Justice would be served, but there was still one more piece of business to handle. The county asset forfeiture auction was held on a Saturday morning in the courthouse square. Trent's lake cabin, his vehicles, his boats, and all of his seized gambling equipment were being sold to pay restitution to his victims and cover the costs of the federal investigation. Harry arrived early and positioned himself near the auctioneer's podium. He wasn't the only interested party. Representatives from 3 different law enforcement agencies were present, along with reporters, curiosity seekers, and a few of Trent's former victims who wanted to watch his empire get dismantled piece by piece. First item up for bid is the lake cabin and surrounding 20 acres, the auctioneer announced. Property includes main house, guest cottage, and 3 outbuildings. Appraised value is $250,000. Bidding starts at $50,000. Several hands went up. Harry waited patiently as the price climbed to $80,000, $90,000, $110,000. When the bidding slowed down, he raised his hand. $150,000. The other bidders looked around in surprise. That was more than the property was worth, especially given its reputation as the headquarters of a criminal enterprise. Going once, going twice, sold to bidder number 47. Harry walked up to complete the paperwork, ignoring the curious stares and whispered conversations around him. Cassidy appeared at his elbow, moving slowly but steadily. The doctors had released her from the hospital 2 days earlier, and she was staying at Harry's house while she recovered. "Dad, what are you doing? That place is worth maybe $100,000 on a good day." "It's not about the money," Harry said, signing the deed transfer papers. "It's about what comes next." 2 hours later, Harry and Cassidy stood on the deck of what had once been Trent's lake cabin. Harry had brought a sledgehammer, a crowbar, and a can of gasoline. Cassidy had insisted on coming along despite her injuries. "Are you sure about this?" she asked. "Positive." Harry swung the sledgehammer into the living room wall where Trent had conducted his illegal business. Drywall exploded in a cloud of white dust. "This place represents everything your husband used to hurt people. Better to tear it down and start fresh." They worked through the afternoon, methodically destroying the interior of the cabin. Harry ripped out the floorboards in the kitchen where Cassidy's blood had been spilled. Cassidy took particular satisfaction in destroying the back room, where loan shark meetings had been held and threats had been made as the sun set over the lake. They piled the broken wood and debris into a bonfire that could be seen for miles. Harry poured gasoline over the pile and handed Cassidy a book of matches. "Want to do the honors?" Cassidy struck a match and dropped it into the gasoline. The flames leaped 20 feet into the air, consuming years of corruption and violence in a cleansing inferno. "You ever think about forgiving him?" Cassidy asked as they watched the fire burn. Harry's answer came without hesitation. "Forgiveness is for men who plan to see someone again. I'm done seeing him." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the flames dance against the darkening sky. In the distance, Harry could see lights from other cabins around the lake, families enjoying evening barbecues, children playing on docks, people living normal lives without fear of violence or extortion. "What happens now?" Cassidy asked. "Now we build something better." Harry put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "The land's still good, even if the house was rotten. Maybe we'll put up a place where Lydia and her little brother can come for summer vacations. Somewhere with good memories instead of bad ones. And Trent gets to spend the rest of his life in a federal prison, thinking about what happens when you cross a cane." Harry's voice was calm, matter of fact. He wanted to play with fire. Now he gets to live with the burns. The fire burned through the night, reducing Trent Huxley's criminal empire to ash and memory. Harry Kane stood watch until dawn, a man who didn't forgive, didn't forget, and didn't lose. His family was safe. Justice had been served. The corrupt system that had protected Trent was being dismantled by federal investigators. That IT was enough.